How's it going, guys? My name is Tavarish, and today we have my SL55 AMG back in the garage, so we're finally going to be working on it. Now, for those of you who don't know, SL originally stood for Sport Light. If you take one good look at this thing, you'll realize that it's not very sporty, and it certainly isn't light. That changes today. So one of the purposes in my SL55 build was to make the car as close to the ultimate GT car as possible. I wanted to have a benchmark as the SLR McLaren. That is the $500,000 supercar made by McLaren and Mercedes, which has a variant of the 5.4 liter V8 in this car. This car is not exactly up to scratch when it comes to the handling department. What we're going to be doing today is turning it from a wallowy, really heavy convertible into something that's a little lighter, a little more nimble, and a lot more sporty. So we are going to be changing the suspension. This car originally came with a very, very special suspension. Now, usually cars come with a suspension that consists of a strut and a spring, and that's basically it. Now, when this car was brand new, it had a suspension that was unlike any other in the industry. It was called an ABC, meaning active body control. It used hydropneumatic dampers on all four corners and didn't have any sway bars at all. What it did was it used a computer to calculate roll and pitch angle and all that stuff to make the ride as comfortable as possible. It also had a sport mode, but to be honest with you, I can't tell the difference between sport mode and regular mode in this car, but maybe it's just because my car is broken. I actually haven't had any problems with this suspension setup, but this suspension setup, if it goes wrong, and they do go wrong a lot, it's very, very expensive. It is incredibly expensive to the point where if you have a suspension fault in this car, you can pretty much write off the entire car, because if I price out all four corners with the valve bodies and the pump and all the lines and all that stuff, including labor, that would be around $10,000 to replace the whole system, maybe more. If I were to replace it with, let's say, used components, where I don't have any guarantees or warranties or anything like that, then I'd still be looking at a $4,000 to $5,000 bill. Now, the main issue of why this suspension is so impossibly, incredibly expensive to repair and maintain is because it uses a fluid that gets compressed to 3,000 PSI. And it uses a fluid called Pentosan. I believe it's CHF11S. So it uses basically a tandem pump. So there's a pump that pumps the power steering fluid and also the hydraulic fluid for the various four corners. And that goes into this reservoir, and that reservoir goes into a valve body. The valve body goes into a distribution block, and then those distribution blocks get fed into the struts, which also do have springs and traditional dampers, but they have a hydraulic ram of some sort to make sure that the car is level, and it can also go up and down. The great part about this mod, the suspension mod that we're going to do today, is the fact that it makes the car a lot lighter. Now, it's not going to be a Lotus Elise, it's not going to be anything like that, but this car weighs 4,400 pounds. And I want to get it up to, well, down to 4,200 pounds. If I can get it down to 42, maybe 4,250, I'll be really happy just with this mod alone. Obviously, I'm going to do some other weight-saving mods later on, but this should be a really good start. Now, let me show you what I'm going to use. Ooh, I love getting new parts. Oh yeah. BC Racing Custom Coilovers, check that out. Woo! These are nice. All right, so this is their BR coilover set. The finish looks really good, and I can't wait to get these on the car. So these are adjustable right here for damping, and they're also height adjustable. So you can adjust the height, adjust the ride height, and these work really, really well on my Aston Martin. I love them, so this should work just as well on this car. Now, the spring rates are a little bit different than what you'd have on the Aston Martin. These are 18K springs in the front and 16K in the rear. And usually a higher number means more stiff, and it can handle more weight. And the 18K is pretty damn stiff, and so is the 16, but that's because it's a very, very heavy car. So this is basically gonna replace that entire ABC active body control hydropneumatic system. But not this alone. I actually have a very custom solution to a very big problem with a coilover suspension on this car. So what a lot of people don't account for with this car when they do a conversion to coilovers is the fact that you need sway bars. And a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people think that you can just replace the struts and you're good. This car is very unique in that it doesn't have any sway bars. It's sort of like a McLaren, but a little more luxury oriented. With sway bars, usually in cars that have them already, you can get aftermarket solutions pretty much anywhere. Go on eBay and find them. But for this car, it's a very boutique sort of custom job. So there's only one manufacturer that makes them. Well, actually two, but the other one doesn't count. And the one that doesn't count is Mercedes. Now, Mercedes actually do make a sway bar for this car. Technically, they make a sway bar for the R230 chassis, and that goes on the SL350 in Europe. We didn't even get those here. The problem with the SL350 sway bars is that they're very thin. They're meant for a car that is basically 700 pounds lighter than my car, and they're not really made for handling. They're not really made for track use or something more sporty. It's more for a luxurious ride with this chassis. Thankfully, there is one company that makes sway bars, and they make a damn good bar. So this, I don't even want to take it out of the wrapping. This is a sway bar custom made by a company called VVK. And VVK is actually here in Florida. I went out and I visited them, and they have a really cool shop and really down-to-earth guys over there. And they've been customizing Mercedes SLs for a little while, and they actually have an all-in-one solution. They have the coilovers, and they have the sway bars, and they have all the stuff. They have they make these cool little things. These are sway bar mounts, and they're CNC'd, and they have the bushings inside. Really, really interesting stuff. So link for that will be in the description below, as well as the BC coilovers. So the first part of this install is me taking this car in the air, taking the wheels off, and then taking off those really heavy struts so I can install these babies. And it's finished. All right, I know that I skipped the entire section of me putting these coilovers in, but it's actually not too different from any other coilover install. So for those of you who don't know how that usually goes, I did record a little bit of it, so I'm just gonna give you a quick rundown. So the first thing I did was I took off the electronic connector at the top. Then I bled the line. There's a little bleed valve, and it just takes an 11mm wrench, and I just put that into a hose, and a hose into a drain pan. So make sure that there's no high pressure oil, hydraulic oil in the cylinder. Then I took off the quick connect fitting, or quick disconnect. It's not very quick though, because mine was stuck frozen on, and that made for a real ordeal, and I ended up having to cut everything off. So my line is currently just chopped right in half, but it doesn't matter because we're going to be taking off all the lines anyway. It was a bit of a pain on my car, at least, because I think my car is from the Northeast, and the bolts, they don't really go without giving up a bit of a fight. So after that, I took off the 13mm bolts, the three, actually no, they're nuts, 3 13mm nuts on the top, and then the strut came right out. This went right in. Just like all of you, I'm pretty curious as to how this looks. Now, these are a prototype set, so this isn't going to be what a production quality set is going to look like, because there are still some R&D issues. They never actually had this on a car where it went around and handled, especially not with a set of sway bars. Let's put this wheel on, and then we're going to go to the harder part of this install. Here goes nothing. All right, let's see how that looks. It's not bad. It's not bad. I think it's gonna settle even more, but that doesn't look bad. Actually, I think if we get a little bit bigger wheel, like a 19, because this is an 18, if we get a 19, I think it'll fill out pretty well. But yeah, that is not bad, guys. Actually, I'm all over the place today. We're not gonna do the sway bars just yet. I wanna make sure that we get the back coilovers installed first, just so you guys can see what that's like. But in order to get to the back, I need to get into the trunk. And as you can see, the top is down, so I'm not gonna have access to the trunk. But conveniently, I believe I'd be able to open it up No? Come on. Gotta do it the old-fashioned way. I never get tired of that. All right, so all the suspension is installed, well, sort of. I still have to install a strut on this side, but I did a little bit of work off camera, and that is basically to prep the rear subframe to come out, because this is a very involved project in which both front and rear subframes have to come out. And for this to come out, it's actually not that hard. I took off the brake calipers and bungeed them to the sides just so the brake lines won't get stretched. I took off the drive shaft, which is basically just 4 bolts. And I also had to replace this rubber bushing known as a guibo. So that's a weird way of saying it. So that's off, the emergency brake lines are off, and the exhaust is off. The exhaust is really easy to take off. It's basically like 4 bolts and the whole thing just comes down. It is heavy, so if any of you are trying this at home, just make sure you support it with something other than your head, because you know, it can smart. But right now I have a 2-ton engine support jack right here, and I'm going to lower it slowly. I still have the bolts on there. I'm gonna undo the bolts, but then I'm just going to get this down just enough so I can slide the sway bar in between. I'm also gonna have to take off the hydraulic lines, because the lines for the ABC suspension that we just deleted is also taking up the space where the sway bar would go. So Mercedes was really good with engineering in a very compact space, even though this car is very, very heavy. I also took out this valve block, this really heavy valve block, and in addition to taking out the ABC struts, I'm also going to be taking out all the lines, because that's also a part of why this car is so heavy. So we're going to be doing a lot of weight reduction, but hopefully I can have it so this whole diff assembly doesn't fall on my head. All right, now that I got the sway bar installed, it was a bit of a pain, just because it is an older car and some things don't come off as easily as they should, but it wasn't that bad. There actually is no rust underneath this subframe. And I found out why Mercedes charges so much money to fix and diagnose the ABC system. All this stuff, all these high pressure lines go right above the subframe, and it's insane. I mean, if one of these lines sprung a leak, and they're apt to do so, it is a common occurrence that these lines break. So I can just imagine that a person with a car like this goes into a Mercedes dealer and says, hey, I got a leak in my strut, or there's a puddle underneath my car, and then they come back with a $5,000 bill. And that's because you have to take off the exhaust, the drive shaft, the subframe, everything has to come out, and then you have to replace this, and then you have to refill the system, you have to do a filter change, and then you have to do a calibration with the computer. That is extremely expensive. So I'm gonna start buttoning everything back up, gonna lift it up, lift the subframe up onto the little locator bolts, And yeah, then I'll button everything up and we should be done with the back. And then the front remains, but I honestly don't think that that should be that big of a deal. So yeah, let's mosey on along. All right, we are almost done, but we have one last thing I wanted to mention because it is quite important to this whole shebang. This thing, what this is a sway bar end link, and it connects our brand new sway bar to our suspension. Now, this car actually did come with sway bars in the SL350. That was a Europe only model, so it does have provisions right here. It's a little hole here, and this is actually a Mercedes part, but since I can't really order SL350 parts in America, what you can do is you can order E-Class parts, W211 E-Class. Rear sway bar end links, and they are the exact same part number, and they're exactly what you need. I got these parts from my friends at FCP Euro, and you guys should get them too, just because when they wear out, and they are a wear item because they do have little rubber bushings in them, you can call them up, or you can just send them back to FCP Euro and you'll get a brand new set for free. That's sort of their claim to fame, their replacement guarantee. I use it, and I hope you guys do too. So link in the description below for that. But without further ado, let's finish this up because it is getting late and I'm probably gonna have to finish this tomorrow. All right, we're in the home stretch. This is the last part, but it might be the hardest part just because there's a lot at stake here. So I have to take off the front subframe, which means the entire cradle that holds the engine and suspension and everything in place. So I have to make sure that all that stuff doesn't get changed, doesn't get moved at least, because I don't want an engine falling on me, I don't want any suspension components falling on me, but I do want that subframe to move a little just so I can maneuver the sway bar into place. So what I have here is a engine support stand from Harbor Freight, and hopefully this should be supporting my engine. And what I've done is, usually they only give you these little chains. They give you two little chains to support the engine, and I thought that that wasn't really the best option. So I actually found this piece of angle iron, and I put two holes in here because there are conveniently two bolts, two big bolt holes in the supercharger, and that is, I'm guessing, for removing the engine and putting the engine in place. But yeah, I secured that to a piece of angle iron, and then that is directly bolted onto this engine hoist, and also this is just used as a fail-safe. Kind of like you'd put on a trailer just in case something fails. Hopefully nothing fails, but this is holding on pretty well. So I'm just gonna go underneath, and then we should start removing bolts, and fingers crossed that everything goes according to plan. All right, so we're now in the home stretch. I have the sway bar installed, I have the sway bar end links installed, and the last thing is something that most suspension installs wouldn't have, but on this car, obviously the ABC is a very all-encompassing system, and there's a lot of different systems working together with the suspension. We have to change the hydraulic component of that suspension. So this is the, it's making, oh jeez. So that thing that just pissed all over my car is called the Tandem Pump. And it has double duty as a power steering and ABC pump. And what it does is it compresses that fluid and it goes through different valves and valve bodies and lines and all that stuff. And I had a hell of a time taking out every single line that had to do with the ABC. That is also a really big part of this project. But if you didn't want to take out the lines, you could get away with just taking out the lines that go in the place of the sway bar. So you could probably just cut them and leave the lines you know, in their place, just not doing anything. But I wanted to save some weight, so I took out the lines, I'll check out all the valve blocks, and I'm gonna show you all that later. But I'm gonna be replacing that ABC pump with this. So this is just a regular power steering pump. Now, when Mercedes want to replace that ABC pump, it costs about $2,000 just for the part. This thing, 35 bucks. Isn't that nice? So since there actually is no version of the SL55 without ABC, then I had to actually get something from another Mercedes. This is from an ML55. So I believe that this is the same one that Tyler Hoover had, his SUV. But this is, yeah, just a regular power steering pump. Got it off eBay, 35 bucks. And just make sure it has this little bracket. Because a lot of them, they do have, the pumps are the same, like on the S500 and E-Class, but they don't have this little bracket, and the ML does have this bracket. The only issue that I might run into is the fact that the connector is slightly off kilter, and it's supposed to be like that, but this is straight. I don't think it's gonna be that much of a problem, and the connector actually is a little bit different, but I think that we can just put a nice clamp on there, and then we should be good. But this is a straightforward install. Taking out the pump was a bit of a pain in the ass, but it's just 2 bolts up here, 1 bolt in the back, and I'm gonna put this in the same direction. After this, we should be good to go, and we will tally up how much weight we saved, and then maybe take it for a test drive. Whew. All right, we're finally done. That took way longer than I thought. And to you guys, I don't know, it'd be a few minutes, but for me, it was 4 days of wrenching on this thing, and 4 long days, because I had to learn a lot about this car. I had to learn about where all the hydraulic lines went and how to take them out, and also how this sway bar and coilover suspension, how that all goes in, especially on a car that didn't have a suspension, a conventional suspension in its design to begin with. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10 from easiest to most difficult, this would rank about an 8.5 or a 9. This is a real chore to get done, mostly because there's a lot of finicky bits. There's a lot of bits that I didn't really think that I'd need to do, but I had to do it. Like removing the lines, the hydraulic lines, was probably the most challenging part, just because they run everywhere. And there's this one part right here that I got done off camera just because I can't really get a camera in there, but it goes from this this frame rail here, and it goes up and loops around the steering shaft, and yeah, it's just a total nightmare. But I got that all out. Some of them I did have to cut. It would just be a lot easier just to cut them. Obviously, I wouldn't be able to sell them later on, but honestly, I don't think I'm going to sell any of these components. Might likely just throw them in the trash, or if somebody gives me a decent offer on them, you can have them. But taking off all those components was the messiest part by far, because hydraulic fluid stinks a lot. And there is certainly a lot of it, or there was certainly a lot of it in this car, because it's not only the lines, but and not only the shocks, but there's valve bodies, and there's accumulators, and the actual this thing and the reservoir, those all needed to be removed. Now, the most finicky job and the most kind of time consuming in this entire thing was something that you guys might not come into contact with if you do this at home. So this sway bar, it's actually a thicker sway bar than what you get on the SL350. It's also adjustable and whatnot. So the fitment on the sway bar isn't the greatest. I did speak to the guys at VVK, and they told me that they will be changing out their formula to accommodate a little bit better. But I did have to grind down a little bit of the subframe. Nothing major, just a little bit, just grinding down a little bit of a lip. And also a little bit of the oil pan, because there's just some casting flash. It's not a big deal at all. It could be done with a Dremel, and that's what I did it with. But just to let you guys know, because I thought initially something was wrong with my kit or something wrong with my car. So I was back and forth with the guys at VVK, and they told me that yeah, they've had that problem in the past and it should have been remedied, but they're letting their suppliers know. And they shouldn't have this problem in the future. But right now I have everything should be good to go. And I should be doing a very good spirited test drive in the next episode. But for now, I'm just gonna get this car on the ground. We're gonna take a look at the ride height, and then I'm gonna tell you how much weight I saved. So here it is. Wow, it looks really, really good. It looks a lot better than I thought, to be honest with you. I was really worried at first when I got those BC Coilovers on that they weren't low enough, but this is bottomed out, and this is pretty much perfect for what I want. Now, I haven't done any sort of test drive, but I have taken it out and put it back in just so suspension can settle. Sometimes when you put a new suspension in, it doesn't settle unless you go over a few bumps, but I've done that already, and this is basically settled. I'm gonna get out of your way so you can just look at the car. Yeah, this is looking really good. I'm very, very proud of it. However, there are a few things about this mod that I probably should tell you if I want to be an objective presenter. So this is not for the faint of heart. I basically took it on as a project. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but I figured I did suspension swaps in the past. How hard could it be? This was the hardest suspension swap I've ever done, but it should be within the wheelhouse of any Mercedes tech or independent mechanic that knows about these cars, or basically any backyard mechanic worth his salt. But I wouldn't try this without at least something like a quick jack. I wouldn't do this outside. This would be a complete nightmare, just because you need some leverage in a lot of cases. Some bolts are a little hard to get, and also some bolts are very stubborn because these cars, well, this car in particular is like 13 years old, or 14, depending on what year we're in. Yeah, it's a little bit of a challenge, but I think it's worth it. We've lightened this thing just a bit because the coilovers and the sway bars, all combined, they weigh 74.1 pounds. But the mess that I took out of this car, the ABC pump and reservoir and lines and valve blocks and shocks and all that stuff, that is more than 210 pounds. So basically, we took out, let me do the math here. 136 pounds if my math is correct. That's a lot to take out of a car, especially on something that also makes the handling better, and not just by the virtue of the weight alone. So that is a very, very good result. Now, for those of you who want to price something out, the BC Coilovers that I got, they're not actually on the market yet. I'm going to be working with BC to make sure that this set is as close to factory finished as possible. The VVK sway bars that I used, they are about $1,200, and you can find them on the website. And all the other stuff like the sway bar end links, the bushings, they're basically just Mercedes parts, and I will have links to everything in the link below. So check that out if you're interested in doing a mod like I am. But I am tired, it is late, I have no idea what day it is, and I think I should end it there. If you liked this video, and I hope you did, I really hope you did, because I got hurt, I got dirty, and I am extremely sweaty because it's like 1,000,000 degrees in here, even though it's nighttime. That's what I get for moving to Florida. But consider subscribing to my channel. I have over 100,000 subscribers. You guys are awesome. But I think we can get that number up. And if you hit that little bell next to the subscribe button, that is a notification button, you get to be part of my notification squad. So that means that you get early access to all my videos. You get first dibs on comments. And don't think I don't see you guys saying first, second, first, second. If you'd like to reach me, contact me, tell me what I'm doing wrong or what I'm doing right, You can reach me at TheRealTavarish, that is Instagram and Twitter. You can reach me at Facebook.com/AskTavarish. You can also reach me at AskTavarish@gmail.com. That's my email. I'm easy to find, and you can basically ask me anything. I will be having videos every Sunday of the questions you ask, so I have a conversation with you guys. That's a lot of fun. If you'd like to support this channel, and I appreciate everything you guys do to support, you can buy one of these shirts. Actually, if you buy one of these shirts, it's not going to support me. It's actually going to support all the relief efforts for Hurricane Irma, Harvey, and Maria in Puerto Rico, the Caribbean, and the US. So they need your help, and every shirt for the next basically 2 months is going to go directly to those relief efforts. So link for that will be below as well. But until next time, on cars like this that require lots and lots of work, but they end up looking fantastic and hopefully run fantastic as well, you guys need to wrench every day.